This is probably the most important video I've probably ever posted here on TikTok when it pertains to the trucking industry. For a long time, a lot of you have been asking what exactly happens to a truck driver when they're placed out of service by DOT for failure to speak or understand English. What exactly happens after that? I now have definitive proof of exactly what happens to a truck driver when they're placed out of service for failing to speak English, meaning their CDL is invalid.
Well, everyone, it seems like enforcement of English language proficiency seems to be easier said than done, and that's despite the positive news from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Some of the announcements that he's made on Twitter/X include the following. More than 7,000 commercial truck drivers have been taken off the road after failing the federal English language proficiency exam. Washington State improperly issued a full-term CDL and skipped the English language proficiency test on a driver who later was involved in a fatal crash. We'll have more updates soon. If you want to drive a truck on American roads, being able to understand English is the bare minimum. California illegally issued tens of thousands of CDLs to drivers who did not meet federal standards, including English proficiency. Those licenses will be revoked. So while we can't argue that English language proficiency is being enforced, we will question this. How effective is this enforcement? What actually happens to those drivers that are, put out of service? Do they actually continue to drive? Do they go home? Or do they actually wait the 7 years that it takes to be English language proficient? Or do they actually just, ignore the out of service order, risk it all, and get back on the road the next day? This past summer, we actually covered a story by YouTube trucker Richie Rich, in which he basically exposed the fact that there was a truck driver that got pulled over at a weigh station. He's of Asian descent. They conducted a English language proficiency test on him. It was actually on the Mother Trucker News channel. It was a featured story, very bright, very viral. And what Richie Rich found was that same driver that was put out of service at that weigh station was actually spotted by him at a shipper. Now, you guys decide if it's the same person. He claims that it is the same person. I'm a big skeptical, but let me know in the comments down below. What do you think?
Out of service until the condition is remedied. So if your co-driver is able to speak a little English, then y'all will be good to go. But until the condition is remedied, you are out of service, which means you cannot leave the parking lot. Thank you.
So after looking back, I realized that this video was taken on June 25th, 2025. So his hair is obviously longer in this new video clip. So maybe they are the same person.
That's the same guy who was placed out of service. Right there. Him. The wool has been pulled over our eyes. We have been had. Okay? FMCSA, the Department of Transportation Secretary, clearly said he's putting these people out of service, and guess what? They are not. Okay, that's that guy. I'm 110% sure that is that guy, because he did the same exact thing here at the security window where I'm checking in at. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh snap!" My antennas went up. So here's my thing, right? The government is not enforcing it. They're still not. Okay, they can put you out for 10 hours, but then where's the enforcement? They're not confiscating trucks, okay? They're not levying fines or penalties. And if they are, these carriers are paying it and putting them back on the road, because these guys will run nonstop.
And let's just say, for argument's sakes, that he is the same person. That story right there just goes to show you that enforcement of English language proficiency appears to be smoke and mirrors, because where's the accountability for the driver? Where's the accountability for the carrier? And guys, it gets worse, because we have another story from a TikTok trucker by the name of Kimberly Bartold. Now, recently, Kimberly Bartold was involved in a hit and run incident involving a driver who did not speak English very well. He could not communicate with the police, and he was actually actually put out of service prior to this incident, which occurred on November 21st, if I'm not mistaken. Today's November 30th at the time of recording this video. So it happened a little bit over a week ago. So this story right here just exposes that there's still a gap between enforcement of ELP and what's actually going on in the real world. So just to summarize, Kim was actually driving early in the morning, doing her thing, and a trucker actually slams to the back of her truck and almost pushes her to the wall, and he just kept going. He pretty much did it deliberately. It was probably a combination of aggressive driving and road rage, but she said herself that he did it on purpose. And when she tried to get him to stop, he actually did stop briefly, but he kept going. So this was actually a hit and run type of incident.
I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm on the side of the road. Why am I on the side of the road at 7 o'clock in the morning? Because the truck driver just hit me. He just hit me intentionally. He came into my lane and hit me, and then he fled. He fled. I had to chase him for miles. I had to chase him for fucking miles for him to finally pull over when he realizes he can't outrun me. He pulls over, and he doesn't speak a word of English. Not one word of English. Not one. Not a single word of English. You gotta use the translator app. I'm like, no, you're gonna wait for the cops because I called 911 because that was a hit and run. There was a hit and run. And he's like asking on the translator, like if he can send me money to my bank account. Do we have to do, he's 100% illegal.
So the fact that this truck driver could not communicate effectively with Kim and he had to use Google Translate should have automatically disqualified him from ever getting a CDL. How did he get his CDL? Now, mind you, this company, I don't know if I already mentioned it, it was based out of San Diego, California, which actually shares a border with Tijuana, Mexico. So I'm assuming he only knows Spanish, and Kim also assumed that he only knew Spanish because he was trying to get her to accept a payment from him, essentially bribe her when she already called the police, and he didn't understand that, so she had to communicate in Spanish that she was calling the police, which is policia. So that's when he finally actually understands the severity of the situation, and simply wiring her money was not going to get him out of this.
I'm mad that he fled the scene of an accident and tried to just bail on this. I'm mad that he doesn't speak a single word of English because that means he doesn't have a legal CDL. He did not have a CDL on person. When I pulled up his trucking company's CSA, they have 5 separate violations of drivers being caught failing the English proficiency. 5 times their drivers have been caught not speaking English, which makes their CDL invalid. 2 times their drivers have been caught without having a CDL at all, and yet they're still somehow in operation, endangering the lives of everybody. I would much rather it happen like this, where he hit me and nobody is hurt or killed, than him have hit somebody on their way to work, taking their kids to daycare. He could have just as easily hit a school bus. It could have been a substantially worse situation. So I'm not mad that he hit me. I'm just mad at the circumstances of him running. And I'm mad that he was behind the wheel of a truck at all when he's not qualified to operate.
So the man doesn't know English. He pretty much ignored his out of service orders a couple weeks prior to this incident. He doesn't know any knowledge of road signs, any knowledge of U.S. traffic laws, because like I said, what he committed was a hit and run, which is actually a felony. But it gets worse, everyone, because the next day, Kimberly actually pulled up the inspection records of his company, and she exposed what we already pretty much know. The company continues to operate despite the history of repeat violations.
So this is the trucking company's DOT number, 3282075. October 12th, literally last month, a truck driver was placed out of service at this trucking company for not being able to pass the English proficiency test. The license plate to that truck is ZP41982. The license plate of the truck that hit me is ZP41982. 1 month ago, this driver was placed out of service by DOT because they failed to pass an English proficiency test, meaning their CDL was no longer valid until such a time that they could understand and read English. Yet despite that, 1 month later, they cause an accident on the roadway. And as you guys have seen, they are still not proficient in English and could not speak a single English word. I need this video to be shared, not just among truck drivers on social media and various platforms, but it needs to be shared to the news media. It needs to be shared to politicians. How many times have you seen DOT bragging about how many non-domiciled drivers that they've put out of service for failing to pass the English proficiency test, as though they're somehow making the roadways safer? But as you guys can see from the damage to my truck, ultimately it's a publicity stunt at best.
So yeah, despite the out of service orders, the carrier continued to operate, putting the same unqualified driver back on the road. There was no follow-up, no verification, and no consequences. So this is just my opinion. It may be a bit extreme, but at this point, what else can you do? Because you give these drivers, you give these carriers out of service orders, they're not compliant with it. So what can you do at this point other than impose hefty fines and issue deportation orders for these drivers? Like, I don't know what else to do at this point, because these drivers, despite not having a commercial motor vehicle license, a CDL, they're still going to drive the truck regardless of some sort of paper that says that they can't drive. So after all that, if they continue to operate, what happens if they continue to operate and an out of service order doesn't stop them? What will actually stop these drivers other than what I suggested, which was hefty fines, deportation orders? What's really going to happen if these drivers just aren't held accountable?
For a long time, a lot of you have been asking what exactly happens to a truck driver when they're placed out of service by DOT for failure to speak or understand English. What exactly happens after that? How many times have you seen DOT bragging about how many non-domiciled drivers that they've put out of service for failing to pass the English proficiency test, as though they're somehow making the roadways safer? But as you guys can see from the damage to my truck, ultimately it's a publicity stunt at best, because these drivers are climbing right back into their truck after they cause these accidents or get these out of services and continuing to pose hazards on the road. You asked what happens when a driver gets put out of service for failing an English test. The answer is they continue to drive that truck until they take somebody's life.
So yes, guys, you saw that, you heard that. It's going to take something pretty much drastic, catastrophic, for there to actually be radical change, which has happened multiple times this year alone, by the way. We covered the story with Harjinder Singh, Jansapreet Singh, Solomon Whitakill O'Brien, so many other crashes, or crashes out of Thomasville, Alabama, etc. And like I said, nothing happens unless, unfortunately, there's a fatality. And at the time of me making this video, the company still remains in service. They are located out of a Mexican restaurant, I believe, which is illegal. This was actually exposed by a Houston-based journalist by the name of Tanya Iser. Companies cannot operate out of restaurants or apartment complexes. Like, what is this nonsense?
20 trucking companies call it home.
That's crazy.
A WFA investigation found all those companies are registered to 539 West Commerce, a virtual mailbox spot called physicaladress.com.
We are a mail handling service, so that's all that we do is just handle mail.
For as little as $8 a month, anybody can set up shop here. No truck required. It's also illegal, and here's why. When a trucking company registers with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, it must list its principal place of business. It's where the company's supposed to keep driver and safety records, and where federal regulators can show up to inspect those records.
So my final question is, what is the point of enforcing this mandate exactly? Now, granted, like I said earlier, this company, this driver, they're based out of California, San Diego, California. And California has shown repeatedly and consistently that they're not going to be compliant with English language proficiency laws. So that does play a part into this story. And Sean Duffy has said that he is planning on defunding California's DOT if they aren't compliant. But these stories you hear from Kim Barsow, from Richie Rich, they're very sad and they're very troubling. And yeah, it makes you wonder, like, is change only going to happen when there are severe catastrophic events? But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. You guys are the greatest. You guys are the best audience on the internet. Thank you so much for 8,000 subscribers. If you enjoy content like this, hit the like button, comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I am Taja Ellison, and I'll see you next time.